All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started on our first layout. And like I described in the video before this, we are going to start just with a simple single column layout. So we're going to go ahead and create a new HTML file and just get things set up real quick. Okay. And of course, we don't want to forget our body, closing body, and our closing HTML. Okay, so just a quick, a little bit of administrative here. For this work, you're going to want to follow along because you need to submit this as a lab. Just go ahead and create an HTML file for each of the different layouts we're going to do. I'm going to do the CSS right inside the HTML. That way it's easier to see the CSS along with the HTML. But just remember, outside of this, when you guys do turn in other work, the CSS needs to be separate. So only on this assignment, when you guys follow along with this lab, can you put the CSS in the HTML. This is strictly for a reference. And the idea being is that you'll be able to go back and look at these as a reference later when you're implementing other layouts. So a single column layout is just that, one column, one section of content. But what I always like to do in situations like this is create a container class. And what this container class will do, well, it'll do a few things. First of all, it will give us a block level HTML element that surrounds all of our content and everything that isn't the body. Because sometimes we want to apply different styles to the body than we do to the background of the particular content area that we're working with. So we want to have that flexibility. Now, this is technically an unnecessary tag. This doesn't have any semantic value outside of the fact that it just describes the container for which all of our content is in. And you could argue either way whether that's actually real semantic meaning. But it's worth giving up just a little bit of that to get the added benefit of having this wrapper container class, and you'll see when I do the CSS in a little bit here how that comes into play. And just for reference, you can call this whatever you want. It could be class wrap. It could be whatever class you want. I typically use wrap or container. That's a fairly common way to describe that type of element. So the next thing we want to do is have a specific section for our content. So I don't think we need to actually give this a label. We can just, or give this a class or an ID. We can just go ahead and create a new section tag. And this will be the main content of our site. So we can go ahead and throw a little bit of dummy text in here, a couple paragraphs. If you guys don't have autocomplete lorem ipsum like that, you can get dummy text on the internet at lipsum.com. There's a bunch of places you can go get it. I try not to use lorem ipsum text too much. It's kind of frowned upon in terms of, when you're trying to build websites around content, you don't really want to spend a whole lot of time looking at this fake text. It kind of distracts you from what we're doing. But for layout examples like this, I think it's fine. So go ahead and save that and refresh. And you should just see your content. So that's fine. We have a single column content, but we also need to have a header on this site. That was one of our sections that we talked about in the illustrated video before this. So we'll put an HTML header tag and maybe an H1 element in there that says this is a header. There we go. So now we have a header section, and footer was the last element that we needed. So the great thing about HTML5 is it introduced us to some really nice new HTML tags. Included in that are footer, section, and header. And what these do are they're essentially semantic tags for how the web evolved from when HTML was originally adopted. So as HTML became more powerful, more widely adopted, and more widely used, we needed a more verbose vocabulary for describing our content. So the the HTML team added some additional tags specifically for these reasons. So the header, the section, and the footer tags are great for laying out content on the HTML side and organizing your files and your content. So we don't need a ton of text in the footer, but let's save that and see what we have. Yep, so we should have our main H1, our 2 paragraphs that are inside the section, and then our footer. So what we're going to do is just a really basic single column layout, and we don't really have a whole lot we need to modify here. So again, just a note, I'm going to type the CSS in line in this HTML file. You guys can also do that for this particular assignment, but just know down the line, I usually always want you to include the CSS in a separate file. So first things first, remember our handy little wrap class that we did. We can now use that as our main container, and we can also set our fixed width on this container. So if we want our site to be 960 pixels wide, we can set it on that wrap class, which encompasses all of our content. And you'll see over here, actually we should make that smaller because of the screen size here. There you go. We can go a little bit bigger, 600. Okay, so this is pretty standard. We've already done this before, so you guys should be familiar with this. And outside of just setting a margin here, there isn't really much else you need to do for a single column layout. You know, you could come down here and add additional styles for your footer and your header. So for instance, if you wanted to do something like this, where your header and your footer have a background, just like a light gray background, you could do something like that. So the only other thing to remember when you're dealing with single column layouts is that you have this option of being a fixed width or a fluid width. Now typically you're going to see websites in a fixed width, usually anywhere in the range from 800 pixels to about 1,000 pixels. And widths in those length or screen resolutions in that size will be safe for most resolutions. Your website will display properly on most browsers, and you shouldn't have to worry about too much. 1024 by 768 is a pretty good target right now for screen resolution and what you should be designing for. So typically website widths between 800 and 1,000 will fit right into a 1024 by 768, because you also have to remember that there's browser Chrome to contend with, so you're not really utilizing all of that resolution. Your other option in a single column layout is to not have a specified width at all and just have what's called a fluid layout. And as you can see, this will expand and contract with the width of the browser. Now what you can do, if you want to add a little bit of focus to the site and maybe a little bit of white space on the side, you can actually set margins that are percentages. So with a rule like this, I can have our margins indented by 10% on each side. And what that means is as I expand and contract my site, the borders on the main content area will stay exactly 10% on either side. So when you're dealing with percentages, you're dealing with fluid layouts, because you're not dealing with a fixed specific width. You're dealing with a percentage of pixels based on the full width of the browser. So this is a very simple single column layout, but you've seen both ways to do a fixed and fluid layout. And we've also introduced some new HTML tags to help us describe our content a little bit better. So in the next lessons, we're going to move on to a 2-column layout with a sidebar, and we're also going to do a fluid and fixed gallery layout using a list. So those are coming up down below.